Hitler had the power to stop D-Day. He had the tanks, he had the soldiers, he had the guns pointed in the right direction. All he had to do was give the order. He never did. And the reason he never did, the reason 150,000 Allied soldiers survived that beach, was not a general, it was not a weapon, it was not a miracle. It was a typewriter, and the man sitting behind it was a failed chicken farmer from Spain who had never once fired a gun in his life. This is the story of the greatest psychological trick in the history of modern warfare. A story about how you can make the most powerful military machine on Earth freeze in place, not by outgunning it, but by making it afraid of something that doesn't exist. 1 million soldiers, 0 of them real. And Hitler believed every single one. It is 1944. The war in Europe has been raging for 5 years. Millions are dead. Entire cities have been turned to ash. And the Allies, Britain, America, and their partners know one thing with absolute certainty. To end this war, they have to invade France. There is no other way. Hitler's forces control nearly all of Western Europe. The only way to break that grip is to storm the coastline, push inland, and fight all the way to Berlin. But here is the problem. The English Channel is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Hitler knows the invasion is coming. He has tens of thousands of soldiers dug into the French coastline. He has artillery pointed at the water. He has tanks waiting just behind the beaches. If his forces are in the right place at the right time, the invasion will fail before it begins. The Allies choose Normandy as their landing site. It is a long stretch of beach in northern France. But Normandy is not the obvious choice. The obvious choice, the logical choice, is Pas-de-Calais. It is the closest point between England and France. Any military mind looking at a map would choose Calais. And that is exactly what the Allies need Hitler to keep believing. They need him looking at Calais while they land at Normandy. They need him so convinced that the real invasion is coming at Calais that he refuses to move his forces, even after Allied boots hit the sand at Normandy. To do that, they need something extraordinary. They need to build an army that doesn't exist, and they need Hitler to be terrified of it. Before there was an operation, before there was a plan, before a single rubber tank was inflated, there was a man sitting alone in a small apartment in Lisbon, Portugal. His name was Juan Pujol Garcia. He was 29 years old. He had failed at nearly everything he had ever tried. He had been a bad student. He had been a worse soldier. He had tried to run a chicken farm and run it straight into the ground. But Juan Pujol Garcia had one extraordinary gift. He could make people believe things that were not true. He hated Hitler. He hated fascism. He had watched it tear his country apart during the Spanish Civil War. And he decided, completely on his own, with no training and no support, that he was going to do something about it. He walked into the British embassy and offered to spy against Germany. They turned him away. He tried again. They turned him away again. The British thought he was a nobody, a dreamer, useless. So he went to the Germans instead. He told them he was a loyal fascist, a Spanish government official, a man with deep connections in London. He offered to go to England and spy for the Third Reich.
The Germans were thrilled. They gave him money. They gave him a code book. They gave him invisible ink and a mission. But they did not know that Juan Pujol Garcia had never set foot in England in his life. He went to Lisbon instead, and from a small apartment, armed nothing but a tourist guidebook, an old train timetable, and British magazines he bought from a newsstand, he started inventing. He wrote detailed intelligence reports about British military movements. He described troop concentrations. He reported on civilian morale. He invented sources. A Portuguese businessman in Glasgow, a Welsh nationalist who hated the English, a retired soldier in Liverpool. None of these people existed. He made up their names, their personalities, their daily routines. He wrote their conversations. He was not a spy. He was a fiction writer, and the German High Command was his audience, and they believed every word. When British intelligence intercepted his transmissions, they were stunned, not because the information was dangerous. They knew it was fake. They were stunned because the Germans trusted him completely. Here was a man the enemy already loved, and in the cold mathematics of wartime deception, a trusted source is worth more than an entire regiment. They flew him to London. They set him up in a quiet house in a neighborhood called Hendon. His British handler, a sharp, unflappable officer named Tommy Robertson, looked at this eccentric Spaniard and saw exactly what he needed. They gave him a new code name, Garbo, after the actress Greta Garbo, because they said he was the greatest actor in the world. And the performance was just getting started.
In the winter of 1943, a group of Allied officers gathered in a basement in London. They had a problem that seemed impossible. They needed to hide an invasion fleet of 5,000 ships. They needed to conceal 200,000 soldiers. They needed to disguise 10,000 aircraft. And they needed to do it while those forces were actively preparing to launch the largest military operation in human history. You cannot hide something that big. There is no camouflage net large enough. There is no fog thick enough. So they made a different decision. They would not hide the invasion. They would hide it behind a bigger one. They called it Operation Fortitude. The plan was this. They would create a completely fictional army group stationed in southeast England, aimed directly at Pas-de-Calais. This fake army group would be so convincing, so detailed, so terrifyingly real that Hitler would refuse to believe it didn't exist. They called it the First United States Army Group, FUSAG. On paper, FUSAG was massive. It had divisions, it had unit patches and insignia, it had supply depots and field kitchens, it had 1 million soldiers. Every single one of them made of air. But they needed the illusion to be physical. German reconnaissance planes flew over southeast England regularly, taking photographs. So the Allies went to work. They built fake military camps. They inflated enormous rubber tanks and positioned them across open fields. They moored dummy landing craft in harbors along the coast, hundreds of them, built from steel tubes and canvas stretched over floating drums. From the air, at altitude, through a camera lens, they looked exactly like the real thing. They generated fake radio traffic. Teams of operators transmitted endless messages, supply requests, training schedules, complaints about the English weather, all of it carefully scripted to paint the picture of a massive, restless army waiting for orders to move. But a ghost army needs a face. It needs a commander so famous, so feared, so unmistakable that the enemy cannot ignore it.
And so the Allies made their most brilliant casting decision of the entire war. They gave Fusag to General George S. Patton. Patton was the general Hitler feared most. The German High Command respected him above every other Allied officer. He was aggressive, brilliant, and unpredictable, exactly the kind of man you would put in charge of a massive invasion force. Patton toured the fake Fusag camps publicly. He was photographed with the rubber tanks. He gave speeches at events across southeast England, always loud enough for the right ears to hear. At a hotel in London, Patton spotted a fellow officer across the lobby, stopped and shouted in a voice designed to carry to every corner of the room, "See you at the Pas de Calais, Gavin." Every word was theatre. Every gesture was a lie wrapped in a uniform. And Germany was watching.
But Fusag was not just rubber and radio signals. The real engine of Operation Fortitude ran through a network of double agents, men and women who the Germans believed were working for them, but who actually fed Berlin carefully constructed lies on behalf of British intelligence. These were not polished professionals. They were, as one historian put it, an odd collection of criminals, playboys, party girls, and one woman who loved her dog more than she loved the war. Her name was Natalie Sergeyev, but everyone called her Lily. Lily was French, of Russian origin. She was educated in Paris. She spoke English, French, and German fluently. She had traveled throughout Europe in the 1930s, charming, sharp, observant. She had once sat across a table and interviewed Hermann Goering himself. British intelligence gave her the codename Treasure. The irony was deliberate. Lily was a nightmare to manage. She had spent years building her cover as a German asset, feeding the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service, just enough real-seeming information to be trusted. Then she switched sides. She came to England. She became one of the voices transmitting fake intelligence about Fusag, one carefully worded message at a time. But Lily had a condition when she agreed to work for British intelligence. Her dog, Babs, a small terrier poodle, had to come with her to England. MI5 agreed, and then MI5 failed to deliver. Babs was held in quarantine in Gibraltar, and then the news arrived that Babs had died. Lily believed the British had let her dog die on purpose, a punishment, a reminder of who was in control, a way of making sure she had nothing left to go back to. Lily stopped transmitting, and then she revealed something that made the blood drain from the faces of British intelligence officers. She had a kill switch. Embedded inside her regular transmissions was a secret signal, a small, deliberate variation in her code. If she ever activated it, the Germans would instantly know she was operating under British control. One tap of that key, one small deviation from her normal pattern, and Operation Fortitude would collapse overnight. The Germans would know Fusag was a lie. They would move their forces to Normandy, and on June 6, 1944, Allied soldiers would wade ashore against an enemy that was waiting, ready, and positioned to destroy them. A grieving woman and her dead dog stood between the Allies and catastrophe. A British colonel sat across a table from Lily Sergeyev in a quiet room. No cameras, no witnesses, just two people, one furious, one desperate, and the weight of hundreds of thousands of lives pressing down on every word. She did not activate the signal. No one knows exactly why. She never fully explained it, but she agreed to keep transmitting. She kept feeding Germany its fiction. She kept Fusag alive. And then, 1 week after D-Day, British intelligence fired her. She returned to France. She moved to America. She died in 1950, largely forgotten,
her name buried in classified files for decades. The woman who held the fate of D-Day in her hands never received a medal, never got a parade, never heard a crowd cheer her name.
Here is the question that gets to the heart of this entire story. Why did it work? Hitler was not a fool. His intelligence services were not amateurs. The German High Command was filled with experienced, battle-hardened military minds. How do you fool people like that? Not for a day, not for a week, but for months. The answer is not about the rubber tanks. It is not about the fake radio signals. It is not even about Garbo's brilliant fabrications. The answer is psychology. The greatest lies are not the ones that trick people into believing something new. The greatest lies are the ones that confirm what people already believe. Hitler wanted to believe the main Allied invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. It was the logical choice. It was the shortest route. Every map, every military textbook, every strategic instinct pointed there. Hitler had already made up his mind. Garbo did not change Hitler's mind. He fed it. Every fake report, every invented agent, every fabricated troop movement was designed to land on top of a belief that was already there. Garbo was not building a new reality inside Hitler's head. He was decorating an existing one. And this is the most dangerous kind of manipulation. When you already believe something, every new piece of information gets filtered through that belief. Evidence that confirms it feels like truth. Evidence that contradicts it feels like deception. Hitler did not trust Fusag because Garbo was convincing. Hitler trusted Fusag because it matched exactly what Hitler expected to see. The Allies understood something profound about power and perception. You do not need to be stronger than your enemy. You need to control what your enemy pays attention to. Control their attention, and you control the decisions. Control their decisions, and you control the battle. Fusag was not an army. It was a mirror held up to Hitler's own assumptions, and he saw exactly what he wanted to see.
Back in Hendon, Juan Pujol Garcia, Garbo, was typing. By early 1944, he had built something extraordinary. Not a real spy network, a fictional one. But a fictional one so detailed, so consistent, so alive that the Germans never once questioned it. He had 26 invented agents. Each one had a name, a background, a job, a personality. Some were greedy, some were idealistic, some were motivated by money, some by politics, some by personal grudges against the British. Garbo knew them all intimately because he had created them all. He sent over 500 radio messages to Berlin, each one carefully timed, each one carefully worded, accurate enough to seem credible, inaccurate enough to be useless, or late enough to arrive after the moment it described had already passed. He even killed off some of his agents. When a fictional source had served its purpose, or when the Germans started asking too many questions about a particular name, Garbo would send a somber message. His agent had died. Illness, an accident. The grief in his transmissions was almost convincing. He would then plant a fake obituary in a British newspaper, and when German handlers checked, which they always did, they would find exactly what Garbo told them they would find. Was he not just running a deception? He was running a living, breathing, evolving story with characters who had relationships and histories and deaths. The Germans loved him. They paid him well. They praised his work in messages back to Madrid. They trusted him more than almost any other source in their entire intelligence network. And that trust, built over years, message by message, fabrication by fabrication, was about to be used to fire the most important shot of the entire war. Not from a gun, from a typewriter.
June 5th, 1944. The wind over the English Channel is cold and sharp. In ports and harbours across southern England, 5,000 ships are moving into position. 200,000 men are packed onto those ships, young men, most of them, who have never seen combat. They are frightened. They know what tomorrow means. They have been told the beaches will be defended. They know people will die. What they do not know is that somewhere in London, a Spanish chicken farmer is sitting at a typewriter, doing more for their survival than every general in the room. The plan has been years in the making. Every rubber tank, every fake radio transmission, every invented agent report has been building toward this moment. And now, at the edge of it, the question is simple and terrifying. Did it work? Does Hitler believe in FUSAG? Does he believe the real invasion is coming at Calais? Or has something slipped, some small detail, some inconsistency, some suspicious German analyst who noticed a pattern that didn't quite fit? There is no way to know for certain. There never is. Deception is not a science, it is a gamble. And the stakes are the lives of 200,000 men. The ships sail into the darkness.
June 6th, 1944. 6:30 in the morning. The ramps drop, the doors open, and Allied soldiers run into the cold water of the Normandy shore. The fighting is brutal. The losses are real. Men fall on the sand and in the surf. The noise is unlike anything human ears were built to process. But something is missing from the German side of the battle. The Panzer divisions, Hitler's most powerful armored units, are not there. They are sitting at Pas de Calais, waiting, ready, pointed at a beach that no invasion fleet is heading toward. In the hours after the first landings, German commanders on the ground send urgent messages to Berlin. They need reinforcements. They need the panzers. Normandy is real. This is the invasion. Hitler is not convinced. His intelligence, Garbo's intelligence, tells him this is a feint, a trick, a sacrifice play designed to draw German forces away from Calais before the real blow lands. He holds the panzers back. He waits for FUSAG.
3 days after D-Day, on June 9th, 1944, Garbo sends the most important message of his life. It is addressed to his German handler in Madrid, and it is a masterpiece of calculated deception. Garbo tells Berlin that the Normandy landings are exactly what the Allies want Germany to think they are, a diversion. The real invasion force, the massive FUSAG army under Patton, is still in position, still ready, still aimed at Calais. Germany must not move. Germany must hold its position. The real blow is still coming. And Hitler, sitting in his bunker, surrounded by maps and generals and the grinding noise of a war he is slowly losing, reads that message, and he believes it. He orders his panzer divisions to stay at Calais. For weeks after D-Day, Germany's most powerful armored units sit in position, waiting for 1 million soldiers who will never arrive, waiting for an army made of rubber and radio waves and the imagination of a failed chicken farmer. The beachhead at Normandy holds. The Allies push inland. The war turns.
While history books describe D-Day in terms of beaches and battalions, the real action was happening in quiet rooms. In a safe house in Hendon, Garbo typed through the night. His hands moved across the keys without hesitation. He had been preparing this moment for 3 years. Every agent he had invented, every report he had fabricated, every relationship he had built with his German handlers, it had all been building to this message. He knew that the Germans would be suspicious. The landing at Normandy was real, and they could see it. The deception was at its most vulnerable in the hours immediately after the first boots hit the beach. So, he did something bold. He sent a warning to Berlin before D-Day happened, deliberately timed to arrive too late for the Germans to act on it. It gave him credibility. It proved he was a real source with real access, and it set up the June 9th message perfectly. Because now, when Garbo told Berlin that Normandy was a feint, Germany already had evidence that Garbo's information was accurate. He had engineered his own credibility, built it up over years, then cashed it in at the exact moment it mattered most. That is not luck. That is not bravery in the conventional sense. That is psychological warfare executed at the highest possible level.
Here is what this story is really about. It is not about tanks. It is not about beaches. It is not even about the war. It is about the power of a story. Every human being, no matter how powerful, no matter how intelligent, makes decisions based on the picture of the world inside their head. Not the actual world, the picture of it. Hitler's picture of the world told him the invasion would come at Calais. It was logical. It was expected. It confirmed everything he already believed about Allied strategy. And so when Garbo told him that Fusag was real, that 1 million soldiers were waiting at the English coast ready to strike, Hitler's brain did not ask, "Is this true?" His brain asked, "Does this fit the picture I already have?" It did, perfectly, and that was enough. The Allies did not defeat Hitler's intelligence network. They understood it. They studied it. They learned exactly what Hitler wanted to believe, and they gave it to him, wrapped in rubber tanks and radio signals and the fictional dispatches of a Spanish man who had never fired a weapon in his life. The most powerful weapon in the history of warfare is not a bomb, it is not a missile, it is not an army. It is a story your enemy tells himself. Feed that story carefully enough, and he becomes the instrument of his own defeat.
Every piece of this story connects. Garbo's typewriter in Lisbon leads directly to Fusag. Fusag leads to Patton's performance on the English countryside. Patton's presence leads to German trust in the deception. That trust is maintained by the double agents, including Lily, whose personal crisis nearly ended everything. And all of it, every rubber cank, every fake obituary, every carefully timed radio transmission points toward one moment. June 9th, 1944. Garbo's message to Berlin. The story is not a collection of interesting events. It is a single mechanism, every part connected, every piece essential. Remove Garbo, and there is no trusted source to deliver the final lie. Remove Lily's crisis and its resolution, and there is no lesson about how close to disaster the whole thing came. Remove Patton's performance, and Fusag has no commander credible enough to terrify a German general. Every element exists because the others demand it. That is what makes this story extraordinary. It was not improvised, it was engineered, piece by piece, over years, by ordinary, flawed, sometimes reckless human beings who understood one thing above all else. You cannot control what your enemy does, but you can control what he sees. And if you control what he sees, you control everything. After the war, the men who planned Operation Fortitude stayed silent. The files were classified. The double agents were quietly thanked and quietly forgotten. Juan Pujol Garcia received the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany, awarded by a regime that believed until nearly the end that he was one of their most valuable assets. He also received the MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, from King George VI. He is the only person in recorded history to receive military honors from both sides of the same war for the same act. Lily Sergeyev returned to France. She later moved to the United States. She died in 1950 at the age of 37. No medal, no recognition, no parade. The woman who held the kill switch, the woman who could have ended Operation Fortitude with a single keystroke, died quietly, largely unknown in a country that was not her own. Garbo himself feared reprisals from surviving Nazi loyalists, so he did what he had always done best. He invented a new identity. He faked his own death. He moved to Venezuela. He opened a small bookshop. He lived quietly for decades, just another ordinary man in a small town surrounded by books. In 1984, a historian tracking the truth of Operation Fortitude followed a thread that should not have existed. A knock on a door in Venezuela. An old man answers. He is alive. He was always alive. He was invited to Normandy for the 40th anniversary of D-Day. He walked among the graves, row after row of white markers in the French soil, the graves of men who lived because of what he did, men who never knew his name, men who went home to their families because a Spanish chicken farmer with a typewriter and an extraordinary imagination made Hitler afraid of a ghost. He stood in that cemetery and said nothing. He had always been better with the written word.